Hello again. Well, that was a busy weekend. We've got our van to unload here. I think it'll probably unload itself when I open the other door. It's all going to fall out. But before we unload it, I'm going to make a little short video of how to set up a bouncy castle business. I'm getting a lot of inquiries at the moment. People asking me their top tips. So if you stick around, I'm going to share my top tips, my 10 top tips for starting up a bouncy castle business. And who knows, while we're doing it, someone else might unload the van. We'll have to wait and see. Okay, let's get to it. So here we are. You thought about starting a bouncy castle company, but you don't really know where to start. Now that's a common problem. Most of us have had that as we start up. What do we get? How do we get into it? Whether I'll get any bookings and so on. There's a lot of negatives, but also a lot of positives. Best thing to start with, tip number one. Now I'm going to give 10 tips here, not in any particular order, but we'll just start at number one, which is research the market. Now before you dive into it, you want to thoroughly research the market. So Google is your best friend. Do as many searches as you can to see what the competition is. If there's a lot of competition, then it may not necessarily be the job to go into, because it's a lot of these companies, if they're established, you're going to find it hard to sort of get a foothold. Some people think they can just come in, start hiring them out cheaper than everybody else, and they'll get the bookings. Well, that will work for a while, but sooner or later you're going to realise you're not making any profit, because you've still got all the maintenance to consider, running costs, storage costs and everything, which we'll get into later. So it's not necessarily the way to go forward. So research the market, have a business plan, and then just arm yourself as much knowledge as possible. Go onto the forums, ask people on there. Most people are pretty helpful, and they will sort of help if they can. So that's tip number one. If you've researched the market, you're ready really to go on to tip number two. Now tip number two is the equipment. What do I buy? Do I buy 12 by 12 castles, adult castles, obstacle courses? There's a whole array of different equipment out there, and it can be a bit of a minefield if you don't really know what you're getting into. But again, as a rule of thumb, I would start with the smaller kids castles, and by that I mean 12 by 12s, 11 by 15s, 10 by 10s. These castles will fit into most gardens, and also they'll go into most venues as well. So you've got the added bonus, you can hire them in the summer and in the winter, whereas the bigger ones are not necessarily going to go into venues. So that's another consideration. So I would recommend starting with 12 by 12s and 10 by 10s. Now this will obviously depend on your budget, how much you've got to spend and so on really. If you've got a set amount, you could maybe start off with 1 or 2 castles. I wouldn't go too deep into it, just see how it goes, see if you like it, because it is pretty hard work. It's not a case of just turning up. You see people turn up on a job rather, they just throw it down, bash the pegs in, and they're gone in 20 minutes. But that's because they've been doing it for a long time and they've got a system in place. But when you start off, you'll forget certain things, you'll have all sorts of problems. You'll get to a house that's got a narrow doorway, you can't fit it in and so on. So always sort of take all that into consideration. That'll also help with the size of the equipment as well. So that's your equipment, that's tip number two. Tip number three is, where do I buy the equipment? So again, there's a lot of manufacturers out there, as many as there was when I started up. Some of the main ones that have stuck around are Air Key. Inflatables was another one, they were bought out by Air Key. That's a lot of my equipment is from. Better Bounce, AJ Leisure, there's a load of them out there, but again, going back to point number one, do your research and look at the manufacturers, look at reviews. Again, reviews are very, very good for this sort of thing. What people say, go onto the forums, onto Facebook and so on, and find out what people are saying. Then you can make a sort of an informed decision rather than just rushing in for the cheapest one. Because as the saying goes, cheaper is not necessarily better. So you want something that's been proven, people are happy with it. Also, again, if you're buying second-hand, find out what the manufacturer is. Second-hand market is a different thing altogether, as is the Chinese market. I've never really bought from China, but I do know the manufacturers I have bought on buy them from China anyway, but I've never actually dealt directly with China because you've got a lot of import costs and duty and excise and all the rest of it. So I always found it just easier to go to a British one. If there's any problems, you're dealing with British law when it comes to sort of things like that, if there's any comebacks. So that's your manufacturers. So you've thought about it, you've got a couple of castles. The next thing is where you're going to put them. So the next thing is storage. Very important, this. So is your property big enough to store castles? If you've only got 1 or 2, possibly a little shed. If you're thinking of getting a few bigger ones, then a shed probably won't be efficient. So you're going to have to look at side storage, either a garage or the storage facilities you see up and down the country. They're going to charge you a monthly fee. So again, going back to point number one, costing it cheaper than your competitors is not necessarily the best idea if you're looking at hiring storage as well, or renting storage rather, because these are all got to be costed in. And in the winter months, you're going to be still paying for storage even though you're not getting those castles out. So again, if you've got storage on your property, that's good. But remember, it will fill up pretty quickly. So even if you've got two castles, you remember you've got two castles, you've got two blowers, you've got about four to 8 mats, which will go for it on each castle. Then you've got your pegs and also your electrical cables. Now this is all part of it. You've got to have all this sort of stuff. So it's going to fill up pretty quickly. So again, start small, 12 by 12s, and just sort of take it from there. See how you get on, and then you can add to it, and then you can think as you're going along if you need to get more storage, or you can look into it more. So after you've got your storage, or you've thought about your storage, the next thing is advertising. Pretty important. It's self-explanatory really. You've got to get yourself out there. So number one is getting yourself a website. Pretty easy to do in this day and age. Anyone can knock one up really. You can do them pretty easily. They're not as important as they used to be. That would be, when I started out, you had to have a website because you had to have your castles all listed, pictures, prices, dimensions and so on. Most companies still do this, have a website. A lot of them go through Bouncy Castle Network, BCM, where they'll set up a booking system for you and so on. But again, this is going to be a monthly costs. So before you're established, it's going to be eating away in any profit you do make. Whereas initially, any profit you do make, you want to be investing back into the business. So try and keep it as small as you can. You can just have a little basic website that's going to get found by Google in your local area. Again, you can use Instagram, Facebook, even YouTube now, people do. So you can pretty much advertise anywhere on all the socials. I'm sure you know that. Now, an important one, a lot of people when they start out think it's not that important to begin with. I'll think about that later on down the line. But I would think about it straight off the bat, and that is insurance. You've got to have insurance in place straight away, because if you're a novice starting out, anything can go wrong. Now, when I say anything, I don't mean just a child hurting themselves. God forbid, you don't want that happening. But you could be bringing a castle into a property and you could drop something, damage a doorway, getting it into the house. These customers then, most of them will probably be understanding, but some of them say, you damaged my door, and they could sort of, take it down the legal route, which you don't want. So have insurance in place straight off the bat. Shop around. Again, there's some established companies, Leisure Insure, at the top of my head. Some of them come and go, and there's always different ones popping up. But again, go onto Google, search it on there, or go on the forums, ask other people who they use, and just get a feel for it. But definitely get it in place. Buy minimum public liability insurance. And that takes us on to bigger jobs. As you start to progress, you're going to get calls from like local authorities, councils, schools and so on, and they're going to want to see this straight away. And again, same with venues in the winter months or the autumn. They're going to see a copy of your public liability insurance, or they won't let you take the booking on. So again, get it all in place. I know it seems like a minefield when you're starting out, but think that way before you begin. It's a business at the end of the day, and there's certain things you have to have in place in all businesses to run it effectively. If you go in just thinking, I'm just going to do a couple at the weekend for a bit of money, bit of beer money or whatever, that's fine, all well and good, but sooner or later you're going to have to sort of make a decision if you want to keep it that way or you want to run it properly. So insurance, get that in place. The next one I would say is testing of equipment. Again, a lot of people think, oh, I don't need insurance, I don't need to have it tested, I'm only putting it out for friends and family in the back gardens and all the rest of it. But sooner or later you will get more and more bookings for sort of private hires. And again, if you're doing ones in halls or venues, some of the bigger ones will insist on it and they'll ask for a test certificate. Now, a test certificate is a PEPA test, which proves that you've had it tested, so it's safe to use, commercial use that is. So much like your MOT on your car or your van, with a PEPA test, it's been tested by a competent person. You can do these yourself if you go on a course, but I always just sub mine out to another guy that comes around, Darren from Jump Bounce. So that's your PEPA tests. You have to have these in place if you want to get these bigger jobs, because once it's been tested, you'll get a tag. It's called a PEPA tag. It's a little blue round tag, like the one you can see there, and it'll have a tag number on it. Now, people can either screenshot this or use the QR code, or write down the tag number and then check the database, and it'll come up as this has been tested and it's passed or failed. So again, it's peace of mind for customers. Most people, when you're putting them in back gardens, don't know about this, but if you point it out to them, it's another level of safety which they appreciate. Again, you may not be as cheaper as the guy down there, but has he got the insurance in place? This is what you need to push across to your customers straight off from the beginning. So you've got your tests in place. I know it's going to cost money, but these are necessities. So this has all got to be budgeted in when you price that castle that you're going to be putting out. Put all these in place. So when you do your peeper test, they'll also do what you call a pat test. That's your electrical equipment. So he'll check your blower, check the cables for any tears or rips or anything like that. They'll also do your cables and your blower. That comes as part of the peeper test. So you'll get one castle tested, one blower and one cable. That's how it used to be. Some of them don't do this now, offer this service, but they did in the beginning. But again, if you wanted to sort of cut costs, you can do a pat testing course. They're quite easy to do. You just got to show you can use it. But again, you do need to buy the pat testing equipment, which isn't that cheap. But you can do them. You can just run a little test, an electrical test, as you would on any electrical appliance. Most offices now all have this in place. You have to be tested once or twice a year. A guy will come in. Computers and stuff are tested, I think it's every 2 years, but on sites, building sites, it's every 3 to 6 months, I believe. But in this industry, as far as I remember, it's still only once a year, which is when I do mine, once a year, every year. And then you want to keep good paperwork, again, the equipment that's been tested. So keep a ledger or a little spreadsheet saying they've been tested and what date and whether it's a pass or fail. Again, there are templates online rather, that will help you do this. So you can look into that. I'll probably do a separate video on all this testing and insurance, because it is quite long and drawn out, and it does probably warrant a sort of separate video. But that's just running over the basics. These are the things you definitely need to get in place before you start to run it. The next one is probably maintenance of equipment. Again, don't overlook this when you're pricing your castles, because there's always going to be maintenance. You bring a castle back, it's got a little tear in it, so you're going to need to repair it. When you buy a castle, you'll get a little repair kit with it. Most of the manufacturers do this. So it's just basically a knitting needle, or not a knitting needle, a little needle that help you feed the thread through. You'll get some glue and a few patches. Most of the tears are underneath. So again, when you buy equipment, ground sheets, you want to make sure you've got a lot of those. And if the ground is a bit sort of lumpy in the garden, you're not sure, always bring extras with you, and you can double up them with a ground sheet. If there's any sharp stones sticking up, put those down and you've got less chance of getting tears. But they do happen, so you need to be able to sort of repair them. But it's pretty similar to a puncture repair kit on your bicycle. You can just sort of tip it over on its back, apply the glue, clean the area, and then just put the patch on, weight it down with something heavy, and that will hold it. Or you can send it off to a guy who'll repair it professionally for you. Now again, the guy that does my pat tests, and he does repairs as well, Darren. So if there's any stitching on the beds that need doing, they do not tear, but the stitching will come loose, because obviously people are bouncing on it day in and day out, so they'll start to come apart a little bit. Doesn't mean it's necessarily going to fail, but it just means it needs a bit of TLC. So you can send them off. He'll do a bed repair or a bed stitch, and they're good to go for another season. Sometimes he may give that as an advisory, and I just say, yeah, if you want to go ahead and do it, and then it's out of the way, rather than, oh, I'll do it next year and the year after. Just get it out of the way. So that's the maintenance of your equipment. Again, your blowers and your cables, you not only do a pat test, you do a visual check every time you put them out. So you check your cables, have a look. Always have more than one cable in the van. So if once you've rigged up your castle and you plug it in, it doesn't work, you've got another cable, you can pull it off, put another cable on, and you can then take that cable back to your property or whatever, and check it over and see what's wrong with it and repair it. A similar thing goes for blowers as well. I always recommend bring 2 blowers with you on each job. So if you've got one castle, 2 blowers, 2 cables, bare minimum. You can take as many cables as you want really, but definitely 2 at a minimum. So if one of the cables is damaged, doesn't work, one of the blowers falls over in the back of the van, it's still going to be another one. You can swap it over quickly, take that one back with the cable and check them over and get them fixed, put them back in your fleet for the following day or the following weekend. So your maintenance, get a maintenance program up with all the other things, get all these things in place. You do need to be organised doing a bouncy castle, running a bouncy castle business, because you've got all these things in place. You've also got to take bookings, and you've got to be make sure you can honour them before you take them on. Sort of take them on, and then if you ring up a customer and just sort of say, I can't do it, I've got something else to do on that day, you'll let them down. You won't stay around too long. They'll think that that's pretty poor, and they'll just ring the next company, and that's it. They say, he let me down, and that's it. So you need to be organised. If you can't take the booking, you tell them at the time. They can then go and ring someone else, but don't take the booking thinking I'll do it and then changing your mind and ringing them up, because they won't understand. Even if it's a family emergency or something, they're not going to understand that. They're just going to see you as letting them down. So that's your maintenance and setting up your castles. Tip number 9, really, don't try and grow too quickly. A lot of people make this mistake to think, right, if I get loads of castles, get them all out there, I'll make loads of money and I'll get established as quick as the other guys. It won't happen. What you'll do is you'll get loads of equipment, you'll have all these running costs, which we've just gone over, and you won't be able to sort of maintain it, and you'll struggle to make a profit, because you're going to have to, the more equipment you've got, the higher your insurance is going to be, your public liability. So you've got to remember all these things. If you try and grow too quickly, I mean, it may work if you're very organised and you've got staff in place and so on, it could work, but I would start slowly, get a feel for the business, and just do it as you're going along. So the old saying is, don't try and run before you can walk, is definitely true of this. It can probably take 2 or 3 years. And also, if you think that I've got a lot more equipment than the other guy down the road and I'm doing a little bit cheaper, you've got to also remember that these companies are well established. They've been around for a long time, and they've probably got reviews on Google and so on, and recommendations. So when the person rings up or looks at these, I think, oh, well, he's been around for longer than this guy. He's just starting up. I'll stick with him. So it takes time to building up a customer relationship. But if you do it properly, you put them up, you set them up, you're cheerful, you do it correctly, the castles are well maintained, clean and tidy, and you're very punctual, you're going to be there when you say you're going to be there, they'll come back to you. And it won't be just them that'll come back to you, it'll be their friends and family. Can you recommend someone who buys at bouncy castles? They'll say, oh yeah, I use this guy here. So that's how it starts to grow. It doesn't happen overnight. You can't sort of buy your way into sort of success, you've got to earn it. So that's pretty much it, really. And also, probably the next one, really, and the most important one, is prepare to sacrifice your weekends. Because let's face it, it's a weekend job, really, and you're going to have to sort of accept that you're not going to have really weekends. You're going to be working pretty much all of them. And all over the summer, you're going to be doing early starts and late finishes. That's just the way it is, really, in this game. Some people think they can juggle it, have an ordinary social life at weekends and do this. It won't work. It's too hard to sort of juggle both of them. So you just got to accept that you're going to be doing this at weekends from now on. So when your friends ring up to go down the pub or go out to do something, go to the football on a Saturday, you're going to be saying no more often than saying yes. That's for sure. And so finally, if you're happy with all those points there, that's all 10 of them. There's probably a lot more, really. If there's any more you can think of, you can leave them in the comments below, and I'll try and cover them in another video. But they're the main ones, and if you're still happy with those and you think you can make a go of it, then by all means go for it. Another point I should point out is, don't give up your job just yet. If you've got another job, you're going to be doing 2 for at least a couple of years, I think. You're going to be juggling both of them, so you're going to be working your Monday to Friday job, and you're going to be doing this at weekends. But if you're prepared to do that, then there's no reason why you can't make a success of it. And just keep it, enjoy the sort of journey, rather than trying to get there really quickly. Just enjoy it. You'll find out in a year whether it's for you and whether you want to carry on. Some people do 1 season and just say, no, it's not for me. It's hard work. It can be dirty and wet when it's rained and stuff, and you're picking up wet castles. You've got to clean them and dry them in after the hire before they go back out again. So it's not as easy as it looks. People think it's easy. It isn't. But at the same time, if you're prepared to do the hard work, then there's no reason why you can't make a success of it. Right, so I hope you found that helpful, and if you want to go ahead, by all means do. Right, I think that covers everything. I think we'll have to unload this van. It won't unload itself. There was quite a lot of equipment from a busy weekend. Oh my god, it's all been emptied. That's point number 11. That's your bonus tip. If you don't want to do all the heavy lifting, get someone else in to do it for you. Right, that's all for now.